Hi, I'm Stephanie Bass.
And I'm Donald Montgomery.
And you're in mixed company. Welcome to In Mixed Company, a podcast discussing mixed race identity and the politics of race constructively and comfortably in mixed racial company. On the podcast today, what to say when someone you love says something racist. And with me today is not Donald, but Saja again.
Hi, folks.
Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Last time we were a little, somebody said I was a little mean to you.
Oh, really?
They said I shouldn't make fun of your age.
It is ageist.
I do need to respect my elders.
Okay, the fact that you just called me elder is disrespectful.
I'm sorry. I respect my way elders.
And we're at it again.
So this episode is coming out, and it's going to be coming out close to Thanksgiving. And
Canadian Thanksgiving.
Okay, fine.
For our American listeners.
All right. And so I thought that holiday dinners could be actually really hard with family, especially if there's political or ideological disagreements.
Over turkey.
Over turkey. And so a lot of people think you should just avoid talking about politics or race altogether. But many experts say, no, that's not actually the case. You should be talking to your family and loved ones about important issues.
And I'm going to have to agree there.
Yeah.
Because from a parental perspective, I feel that growing up, I was kind of shielded from the realities of life. And I get it. You want your children to have some childhood innocence and enjoy life. But given the information age that we are in, given the cultural, social, political context that we're living in currently, especially in Ontario, Southern Ontario, parts of Canada, I think it's important to engage in these conversations to model for our kids how we respectfully disagree about items or topics or issues, and how we don't always have to agree with people we love.
And I will model extreme anger.
Well, that was a given.
No.
So thanks for that.
I'm usually pretty good when I'm speaking with people that don't agree with me. Emailing people that don't agree with me is a little different.
Yeah.
On Facebook with people that don't agree with me is very different.
Very, very different.
It's only when it's people that are my friends and they're saying really
problematic
dumb
things.
Nonsense. And I'm like, that was really dumb. So that's usually my opener with 4 U's, dumb. So that usually starts the ball rolling.
And then the 5-day back and forth ensues.
Yeah, but it's equal footing, right? Because, I can't spell dumb, and you're saying dumb things, so we're kind of equal. We're on the same page. That's how I see it. Don't look at me like that. All right.
Insert facial expression here. Confused look.
So psychologist Vale Wright says that you should engage your family, even if they disagree with you. Because if you stay on the surface with your relationships to keep the peace and choose not to have tough conversations with people, what are you losing out on the long run? Low blood pressure. That's what I'm losing out on. A calm demeanor. What else?
But what I will say is, one really has to think about what, the value of that relationship.
Yeah.
Before we engage in really any conversation, because we don't want to lose relationship over ideological things.
I'm going to stop you there. Depends on the relationship.
Well, this is what I'm trying to say. That's why you got to assess how much is this worth to me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Your 95-year-old aunt says something hugely problematic. Are you going to dive right in?
Which aunt?
On which side?
Yeah. Which one is it? Because on the one hand, perhaps.
Just as an example,
Another journalist, Annalisa Morelli from QZ.com, says it's rare to be able to talk seriously with someone who thinks differently than you, but who will sit and listen anyways. Whether that's because they love you, or perhaps because the temptation of the steaming turkey in front of them is simply too great. Either way, you got an in. If they love you, or they're just hungry, either one, right?
Yeah, so one tip I will say is if you're going to dive in with these topics, make sure you have a real good meal in front of you.
That's what Donald would say. He's
food brings people together.
Make sure they have food in front of them.
Yeah.
They're not like watching it pass around. Then you'd be like, hey, so I heard you say something about Mexicans the other day on Facebook. It's like, wait till they have food in front of them.
Yeah, they need to be like in the act of eating.
Yeah, let them take their first bite, and when their mouth is full, then jump. That's not what any of the advice says, but
no, I'm sure it
that's
doesn't.
Pretty much how I would go.
All right, there we go.
And so what we're going to do today is we're going to hopefully help you have conversations about these important issues about race and politics without the discussion erupting into an epic family fight.
And I will say, every family is different. I'm not going to point any fingers here, but it might be in my experience that some of us don't need to talk about race or politics for things to erupt into an epic family fight.
Yeah, that's true.
So if you already have a lot of material, feel free to leave this one alone.
Yeah, just, don't bring another fight into it. If you're going in there, if you're like, oh, I know that Uncle Terry's going to be there, and he has some questionable opinions about quote-unquote immigration. So if you know that that's going to come up, have a plan, right?
Mm-hmm. And it shouldn't be flip the table.
I mean, that's always an option, but I would plan C. Make it like the last...
Plan F.
Plan F for flip?
Yeah.
That's cool. I can do that. Because plan C is cannibalism. That's another episode, I guess.
Moving on.
So plan number 1 is to have empathy and use effective communication skills. So this advice comes from Vale right again. So she says the first thing to do is think about what your goals are in having the conversation. Like, do you want to change their mind? Do you want to gain some information or hear their perspective? Or do you just want to explain yourself so that your family understands? You got to think about what you want in the end, because chances are you're not going to change Uncle Terry's opinion on quote-unquote immigration, right?
No, you're not.
Or maybe your aunt will continue to think you're a godless person who has too much of a bleeding heart to have an opinion on anything. Did I get too personal? Sorry about that.
Wow. You hit it.
So, make sure that you know what you expect from it. Do you expect to change somebody's mind? I don't know if you can do that over one dinner. But do you just want to get their perspective, or do you just want to tell them about what you think? Those are more realistic goals. And you're somewhat of an effective communicator, aren't you?
Well, I have to, in my work, have challenging conversations.
I think we should trade jobs
regularly.
for one day. I wouldn't get you fired, I promise.
Well, there's no guarantees. So we'll just stick to our skill sets. So I find myself having to navigate difficult conversations fairly regularly. So a few things that I always keep in mind is, think about what your goal is. And often my goal is listen to understand. Really try to hear the person, where they're coming from, what is influencing that opinion. Because that also gives you also some insight into how you might be able to argue or influence with them. For many people, when it comes to topics like race or immigration, so to speak. They have
quote unquote immigration.
Quote unquote immigration. They have their opinions are based on experiences, but often those experiences are really limited. So,
or I think that their experiences are based on fear, especially if they're the dog whistle type immigration thing. Well, we need a border wall, or they're coming in and they're not sending their best people, like Donald Trump had said. I think that there's fear with the limited exposure, right? Mm-hmm.
There's fear. There's stereotypes involved. So if you listen to understand, you hear those things coming out, so then you can make a judgment about where to go next or how far you want to even go with this conversation.
And I think that there's a podcast I listen to called Conversations with People Who Hate Me, and it's by Dylan Marin, and he's a LGBTQ activist and podcaster. And he talks to people who have left hate messages on his videos or on his podcasts. Anyways, he calls them and he talks to them. And he has a very interesting way of doing it, because he does empathize with what people say. And then on the podcast, he has said that empathy doesn't equal endorsement. So he doesn't agree with what they're saying, but he does listen to them, and he does validate that, yeah, maybe they did feel fear, maybe, and then interjects ideas. Well, maybe you don't know as much about that as you thought you did, or, and so I think that that's a really good point. The idea that empathizing with somebody doesn't mean that you agree with them or endorse what they're saying, but that you do recognize that you are listening to them and willing to hear their side. And when I've watched other people, like TED Talks of Black men who have infiltrated the Klan and stuff, it was always the same thing. The Klansmen who end up leaving the Klan were like, well, he listened to me. And so I think that is telling, that knowing that you're willing to listen to somebody, I think is very, very important.
Yeah, quite simply, it's a give and take. If you want to be heard, you have to be willing to hear other people.
Yeah. Even though it's really hard and sometimes it's terrible, some things that come out.
And another thing that I've discovered as well in having discussions about or conversations about difficult topics is that sometimes it's a well-placed question that leaves people thinking. It's far better than any sort of statistic or argument or diatribe you might go on to try and sway them a certain way. Just something that gets people thinking.
Yeah, I think that's good. And the last thing is that you need to have a coping plan for how you're going to deal with the feelings that you're going to have if your conversation doesn't go well, or if you couldn't enact the change you wanted, if that was your goal, because that's a possibility. And again, this goes back to where we started with, think about this relationship. If you're getting into it with your mother, where's this going to end? Yeah. And how are you going to, what's at stake here? Yeah. If you really get into a heavy argument and people leave feeling angry or emotional, how are you going to fix it? Yeah. Because sometimes based on that, I think that's why some people just decide, you know what, not worth it. Yeah. I think it is worth it, though, because even if you do have that tension, I mean, it's a part of your sort of truth, right? And so I think that is important to get out. Plan number 2, keep it small, keep it positive, which I don't think would work in every situation, but it could work. And so I sort of simplified that from a piece of advice from Susan Daggett-White, who's a professor of social work at Northern Illinois University. And her advice is to keep the conversation to certain issues. Like, maybe don't start with, "You're a racist, Uncle Terry, here's why." Now, I don't have an Uncle Terry. He's not a real person. Okay, good. It's just an example. But you want to keep it to individual issues, and you want to I'm sorry about the really loud motorcycle. You want to connect it to a person's emotions, and point out the positives of what you're trying to talk about instead of, enacting on the person's fears. Which I don't think is going to work in every situation, depending on what you're talking about.
Yeah, because some folks, once it gets they get defensive, and then it expands into larger issues, and then they're like, well, that's the problem with this whole world. And
yeah. Plan number 3, it sort of goes off to our first one. It's you just make sure that you recognize the motivations of your speaking partner and of yourself, right? So, Kenneth Cloak, who's a mediator without borders, so he goes around the world and trains people to do this sort of mediation work. And he said that prejudice comes from fear, not hatred. In most cases. I don't think it's possible to make a blanket statement like that. But in a lot of cases where you have people that are espousing sort of racist ideas, it's not because they're racists. It's because they are afraid of something, or they are ignorant of something.
Or they've had limited experience again.
Yeah.
For example, I know people who have very Islamophobic comments to say. And often I often ask them, who in your life do you know who's Muslim? Like who have you, name a name of a person who you know is Muslim? And often they can't. They have a lot to say about people who are Muslim.
Yeah.
But they've never, ever met someone who follows Islam.
Yeah.
Or if they have,
or they don't know.
Or they didn't know that they followed Islam. And they made an assumption because they spoke and acted and talked in a way that was comfortable for them that they couldn't possibly be connected to Islam.
Yeah. So you also don't want to speak in absolutes. It's not all or nothing. There's a little give and take, I think, when it comes to having a conversation.
Yes, because there will always be someone who will find an example that's the exception to what you're saying. And
you're like, okay, yeah, that is an exception.
Okay, so yes, that did happen. However, in general.
And then Cloak also notes that even a small change is positive, especially for someone who's spent a lifetime thinking in a certain way. Because you've opened the door, right? So the door is a little more open, and you have room to expand on those ideas at a later time, right? You don't have to do everything right now. Like these are people you love, so they'll be around.
Again, the well-placed question.
Yeah. And Louise Phipps, this kind of goes with recognizing the motivations, says that you want to try and get conversations to be one-on-one. It's probably not a great idea to show up and sit down at the table with 12 of your family members and go, so, Jane, still hate them Muslims? Like, that's not a great plan.
That's not a great opener, period.
And it doesn't give you a chance to fully understand that person's point of view, especially if it's in a large group. And this is one thing that I have a very hard problem with. Don't try and get the last word.
I could see why you struggle with
that one.
Don't
suck your teeth at me. I find it hard, and I don't know why, and I'm getting better at it. But you don't need to have the last word. It's about quality, not quantity. So,
or the last look.
Yeah.
Or the last eye roll.
Okay. I got it.
All right.
And so if you can have those plans, like recognizing your own motivations, trying to keep it small and keep it positive, and then recognize the motivations of the person you're talking to, then I think that your conversation will go a little more smoothly than if it's just a full-out battle royale style political debate, right? I mean, unless your family member is Ted Cruz, chances are it's going to go all right. Did you see the Ted Cruz debate?
I did not see the Ted
Cruz
debate.
He's a walking nightmare. I put that out there. So sorry, Ted Cruz fans, if you're there. He's not a good dude. So I found some do's and don'ts from a couple places. Because I like a good do's and don'ts list. It's easier than having a plan sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I will put these on the website. Maybe I'll make it into a nice little
chart
pictograph so that you can print it out and have it with you beside your plate.
Beside your turkey-shaped name card.
Give everybody one.
Here's some working agreements for Thanksgiving dinner.
For our dinner. Here's our norms of collaboration, everybody. And so, I'm just going to read them. Do. Give the other person some time and space to tell you what they think. I have a challenge with that.
Yeah, try not to interrupt. Don't interject too quickly.
I have a problem with that. Ask them to tell you more about their opinions.
For example, wow, that's a really strong statement. Tell me more.
Yeah, what do you mean by that? And try not to say it the way I would say it. Say it like in a way that's like neutral.
You tell me more.
There you go. I'm like, oh, tell me more about that.
Through clenched teeth.
Show how you care about their feelings and you don't want to upset them. I think that goes a long way. And I know that goes against some of the respectability politics that we have talked to. But this is your family.
Yeah, I'm struggling with this one a little bit. Like, I'm not trying to upset people, but
sometimes I am.
If you are upset because I'm pushing back on some of your ideas, I'm not in a hurry to be like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. Let's drop it.
I don't think it means like that. I mean, like, just like reiterating, like, I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but this is an important issue to me, and I really want to know what you have to say about that. And I might not agree with you, right? And most people could be okay with that. So, I mean, take that one with a grain of salt, or a dollop of gravy, or whatever you eat at the holidays. Make it clear that you're listening carefully to what they have to say. I'm a nodder and a that's what I do when I'm listening, as most of the people who listen to this podcast probably know, because when I listen back on the podcast, I hear a lot of I mean, that's just my marker. Some people have other things. Eye contact's usually a good thing.
Which ties into the one
go ahead.
About turning off your phone.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so some folks, they settle every argument by going to Google.
Oh, yeah.
I would recommend...
Hey, Google, Uncle Terry just said this. Is that racist?
Hey, Siri.
Yeah.
Turn off your phone and really try to engage. Because you don't want to appear that you're only trying to speak and not listen. And also, it's family dinner. Come on. But let's put down the devices and
this goes for any place. If you're arguing, it takes commitment and respect, and so put the phone away. You got to show both of those things,
right?
If you want them to respect and listen to your opinion, right?
Don't be like playing Candy Crush while you're saying,
nobody plays Candy Crush anymore. Just you, because you're 50 years old.
You heard it here, folks. The ageism is very real.
If you bring things up, calmly and clearly state what you would like to talk about, or pose a question to someone or the whole table in a way that doesn't sound accusatory.
So, who here is racist? Put your hand up.
So I think that's a good one. I need to star that one on my card.
Yeah.
That is what it is. You don't want to be accusing people of anything, because that's going to shut down the whole conversation. It's okay to take a time out if the conversation becomes disrespectful or heated. What I like to do is put a well-placed joke.
Laugh it off.
I do.
Transition to dessert.
Yeah, I'm a well-placed joke placer. Do you have any Thanksgiving jokes? No, we should probably find some and put on the blog. Yeah. We got you. I will put some turkey jokes.
We'll find something
on the blog for you.
Yeah.
You want to summarize what people are saying to you? That's just good listening.
Yeah. Paraphrase.
Yeah.
Paraphrase.
Because then you want to make sure that you are understanding what they're saying.
So, some ways to do that. For example, so are you saying that for you, and summarize statement there, the I'm hearing you say, or what I'm hearing you say, stay away from those ones.
Yeah.
Because that just makes it all about you, not about them. So, there you go. There's some tips.
Those are good ones. And acknowledge if someone has given you something to think about, because that will happen, right? Because all learning is good learning.
For example, I've never thought about it that way. Thanks.
Yeah.
Real simple.
Oh, that's a really good point. I do that one.
Didn't expect that from you, but thanks.
Okay, that's a little too far. That's what you would say to me. I'd be like, oh, thank you. This is why I call you old. And then you want to thank people for the discussion. That's just the thing that you should be doing. Don'ts. These are written from my heart, people. Because these are all things that I've done. All right?
Don't be too direct or blunt. Go.
Yeah, that's me. I have a problem. I warn people about my bluntness, though, and people who know me know. They're like, oh, that's Bass.
Heart of gold, but that mouth.
Yeah, just this mouth. That's right there, too. I have a mug that says that. I got a good heart, but this mouth. Don't interrupt them. I do that, too. But
You get excited.
I do.
And then you come in with the, I'm going to have to stop you right there.
I'm going to get angry. Yeah, that's my classic.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to stop you right there. Don't do that. That's going to shut down the whole conversation. Ask me how I know. Don't suggest that things are simpler than they are, or that there is one definite right answer to a question. I don't really do this as much, but I've had this done to me. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's not that complicated. I think it is. Like, because more than that, you're insulting somebody's intelligence or ability to understand their own opinion. That's pretty problematic.
Yeah.
Don't monologue, says the girl with the podcast. It's not your podcast right there, so listen up, right? You know what? In my life, I know it seems that I'm pretty verbose and talkative, but in my life, I listen a lot, especially in groups, especially at a meeting. I listen more than I speak in a meeting.
Which is also a survival technique.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because of my mouth. I get it. It is a little bit.
Trying to stay employed.
But yeah, don't monologue. Listen more than you speak, right? Like I said, it's about quality, not quantity, when you're trying to say something. Do not express judgment and do not try to be right. Yep. There you go. I do that. Sorry. And then don't have or suggest a negative attitude towards the person who has an opinion different than yours.
Especially if they're your family members. We're into family preservation here.
Yeah, don't after dinner sit down with somebody and go, Uncle Terry, eh? What an idiot. Like, don't do that.
No.
No. I'm not going to tell you how I know about that, too. So I found a great toolkit by the Women's March organization. You know, the people with the kitty cat hats and stuff. And they have a one-page thing called Daring Discussions Toolkit. And it's actually really helpful, and it goes through a bunch of different strategies and openers about having conversations. So they start with a quote that says, "Be brave enough to start a conversation that matters," and that's by Margaret Wheatley. And I think that is, if anything was going to summarize this episode, I think that would be it. It's 2 pages, they're 3 pages. It's a fold out, and it's got some sample questions, and it has different plans and strategies. So it's a really good toolkit to print out. And so I will link that on the blog as well as my little card. You can, maybe one side will be a name card, and that's the part that goes towards the other people, and then on the other side are the do's and don'ts.
I like that.
I think that that's going to be useful.
I think we should. Oh, and they also give some examples of issues, which I think are worth reading off a few. Here are some issues that might be classified as some daring conversations. Race. It says in America, but anywhere, really.
Race in the world.
In the world. Feminism. Immigration. The real immigration or the quote-unquote immigration.
Either kind.
Islam or Islamophobia. LGBTQIA+. Transgender perspectives. Income inequity. Gender bias in the workplace. Gender roles. Disability perspectives. These are all excellent, but difficult topics.
Yeah. And I think that it's good. You want to spice up your dinner. You don't want the conversation at Thanksgiving to be bland like mashed potatoes. Right? Did you like that?
Get some gravy in there.
Just spice it up.
Add some hot sauce.
Yeah. I would, but...
Oh, I know.
Not a lot of people would.
Yeah.
I think it's probably not going to go how you think it will. And that can go either way. Mm-hmm. It could either turn out to be a really positive thing, or it could be something that you're like, whew, that was tough.
Yeah.
Don't overplan it. Just be accepting of what happens. Mm-hmm. And if you try and it doesn't work, it's fine to just be like, oh, I tried, right? Mm-hmm. Like, there will be other opportunities. And you can take those opportunities later and talk to people at a later time.
Right, because you love these people. They're your family.
Yeah, sure you do.
Yeah.
You might.
Okay, we like the whole difficult family dynamics is another episode, I think.
And, if it doesn't work out, there's always booze.
Alcohol, the cause of and solution to many of our problems.
Yeah, I guess so. So, thanks for the chat. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Not today, Stephanie. Okay. I'll let you have the last word.
Thanks. You really are. That's so nice of you. Just because the podcast is over doesn't mean the conversation has to stop. We would love to hear your comments, reflections, and questions. Visit us at our blog, imcpodcast.blogspot.com, or tweet to us at imcpodcast. If you're a Facebook user, we have a page there too at facebook.com/imcpodcast. New episodes upload every Sunday. Our theme song is called Righteous Fight by Angara. Thanks for listening. See you next week.